Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, absurdism in the extreme. It's all available here in the Tales from the Omni Vault book series. Check the description for Amazon links so you can get your copies and start reading today. Thank you all, and now, on to the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni viewer, and everyone else is talking about these little bits of superhero news, so I thought I'd share my thoughts on them as well. There have been some pretty big and controversial announcements made over these last few days. Starting with the return of Robert Downey Jr. to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but not as Iron Man. Apparently they are keeping Tony Stark dead, unless there's going to be some major twist here. Instead, he's returning as Dr. Doom, which has a lot of people unsure about how it's actually going to go. Now, for the record, I would like to say that I do think that Robert Downey Jr. can, in fact, deliver a good performance as Doom. Because Doom is a very different character, of course, but RDJ is a really, really good actor. I know most people these days only have a frame of reference for him playing Iron Man, of course, and maybe they branch out into things like Tropic Thunder, those two Sherlock Holmes movies, or Dolittle, if you happen to have seen that one. But that doesn't even really begin to explain the full range that RDJ has as a performer. If you look at what he was doing before that dark period where he was in prison, and he was a younger and up-and-coming rising star, I mean, just watch Chaplin. He plays the role of Charlie Chaplin as, it's just so incredibly good. And then, of course, there's comedic stuff like Soap, and, I mean, the man has more range than I think a lot of people who only knew about him when he entered a Marvel movie usually know about. So the idea that he can play a hero in one set and a villain in the next set doesn't necessarily strike me as something he would be incapable of doing. Now, a lot is going to depend on what he's allowed to do, of course. If they're bringing him back specifically because they want him to just be Tony Stark again, but as a bad guy, well, then we're going to have a problem. But in terms of what he's actually able to do, I have no doubt he can play a good Dr. Doom. But of course, with him, the Russo brothers are also coming back to do the next few Avengers movies, including Kang Dynasty. I mean, Doomsday, apparently it is now, because Kang was never being set up to be the next big villain after Thanos. What could possibly give you that idea? It's not like the movie was originally called The Kang Dynasty, or there was a post-credit scene showing a whole bunch of different Kangs that's never going to go anywhere. No, obviously they didn't have that sort of plan that they had to change after their actor wound up being, well, the center of controversy. Well, I'll just leave it at that. Regardless, the Russos are also coming back, because, you know, everybody knows them for directing some of the more successful MCU movies from the early days, so it's thought that bringing them back and bringing RDJ back is going to help get things back on track. Which, right there, is the thing that sticks out to me the most, because this really does just feel kind of like a stunt. Obviously, Disney had their plans. We know what they wanted to do post-Endgame. We were all paying attention. Of course, the idea of if there even should have been a post-Endgame is up for debate. But we all know what they wanted to do, and their plans have consistently fallen apart since then. They wanted Captain Marvel and Black Panther to be the new main characters of the MCU. Well, nobody likes Captain Marvel, or Brie Larson for that matter, and Chadwick Boseman sadly passed away, and for some reason they refused to recast him, so now they've replaced him with his sister Shuri, which has been met with a mixed reception, to be sure. So who knows if they're actually going to commit to that, or even move forward with more Black Panther material. Of course, we also addressed the whole Kang issue. They clearly wanted him to be the big villain at first, and now they're trying to pretend like that was never the case, even though it clearly was. And as for everything else, Their Disney Plus shows have gotten consistently fewer and fewer views as they've come out. Works like Thor: Love and Thunder actively drove audiences away. Eternals is apparently considered a dead end now. Everyone keeps forgetting about stuff like Shang-Chi. It's just been a whole huge mess. They had something good going for a while. Once they reached a natural endpoint, they wanted to keep going, and now they're not really sure what to do. And after throwing everything else at the wall and allowing a Deadpool and Wolverine movie to happen, but according to most news, it was under protest from the higher-ups, now they're thinking their best option is to kind of go back to what worked before, but not as a hard reboot. They're bringing back RDJ because he was the guy who got the MCU rolling. They're bringing back the Russos because they're what made the MCU money later on. But it's all just a ploy, and not one that's actually guaranteed to work either. Putting aside the reception of how nobody's sure what to make of RDJ coming back as Doom, we also have to look at the fact that Disney technically tried something like this already. When Star Wars: The Force Awakens was released, it got a mixed reception, but at the time it was skewing mostly positive because people were just happy for there to be more Star Wars. And they figured, yeah, J.J. Abrams is J.J. Abramsing with his mystery box stuff, but it's only the first movie. We'll find out where it's going eventually, because we've never been burned by that before. Then The Last Jedi came along, pretty much upended everything, and reception started to get a bit more negative. So even though Colin Trevorrow was originally set up to do the third entry in the trilogy, they basically went back to Abrams and said, hey, you made a Star Wars movie that people liked. Can you come in and maybe finish what you started? And we all know how The Rise of Skywalker turned out. So it feels like they're trying to do that again, but with Marvel. And I'm not sure it's going to work the way they think it will. And what's really disappointing, of course, is that it just means they're exploiting the people they're bringing back. They didn't bring RDJ and the Russos back purely because they know audiences like them. They brought them back because they're basically going to be the figureheads. Disney wants these guys to hopefully be a distraction of sorts. They're puppets, basically. They're meant to draw us back in because we associate them with the good times and make us forget about the potential bad times. But I think at this point, Marvel has lost so much goodwill over these last few years that I'm not sure it's actually gonna work. Again, I have no doubt that RDJ can actually make a good Doctor Doom. The Russos coming in to make a good MCU movie again? Flip a coin. I mean, I liked Civil War well enough, but I wasn't all that thrilled with Infinity War or Endgame when in the long term. So, who knows? I just feel like it's a little exploitative at this point. Jumping from Marvel to DC, we have another bit of news regarding the upcoming animated series Batman the Caped Crusader, which is going to air eminently on Amazon Prime. And I might give that a look too. But there was an interesting bit of news that dropped. You may recall that as they've been revealing stuff, perhaps you heard Bruce Timm was allegedly quoted as saying, "Wait until the fans get a load of what we did with Harley Quinn," paraphrasing a little. As if what they did to alter her character was somehow going to be so big that maybe he was anticipating backlash. Of course, we have seen what Harley Quinn is going to be like in the trailers, or at least I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Harley Quinn, and the reception has just been almost apathetic, I think. Like, nobody's overly thrilled, but nobody's reacting with vitriol either. Like, yeah, she looks drastically different. Yeah, apparently she's going to be Asian in this incarnation. Oh well, no one seems to be all that mad. What they're mad about is the Penguin. Curiously, this reveal for what the Penguin's going to be like in Caped Crusader comes at almost the exact same time as the trailer drops for the Penguin series that's connected to the Matt Reeves Batman movies. And I have seen that trailer. You know, looks like it'll be an interesting Sopranos reboot, because that's basically what it looks like. If you were to have shown me what that trailer was and not shown me the title, I would have thought, oh, they're rebooting The Sopranos, I guess. Weird that they're using terms like Gotham and Arkham, but wait, is this Batman? But I wouldn't have necessarily guessed it right off the bat. But this isn't about that show. This is about the animated show, where it was revealed that the Penguin is going to be female. And that's what's got people up in arms. Now, before I get into my own thoughts on it, I'm going to say this up front. I am not inherently against the idea of gender-flipping characters. If you watch the couple of videos I did about the Jellystone series, which hardly anyone has, but you can look at them if you want proof, I actually said that one of my favorite things is that certain characters were gender-flipped. Because not only does it add a bit more of a female presence to the Hanna-Barbera cast, but it also makes some of those characters feel more original. I mean, let's be honest, Hanna-Barbera didn't exactly have a reputation for being original. The show that really got them rolling, The Flintstones, was basically the Honeymooners' Stone Age version. But the way they treated these characters here felt like it was actually a worthwhile change. It was something that brought something new to the table, and it also helps that the show itself is generally good. It isn't always great, and some of the changes they made to some of the cast members wasn't necessarily that good of an idea, but overall, it works. And I count the gender flipping for the most part among that. And of course, you know, there was the Battlestar Galactica reboot, which was done before I actually had a YouTube presence, before YouTube even was known for having that sort of presence in general. But I did actually think that ultimately it worked, again, because it was a good show. Yeah, it was a bit surprising at first that Starbuck and Boomer were women in this case, but they found a way to actually justify it within the show. I never actually finished it. I did wind up dropping off of it just because it was getting a little too dark and depressing, and I was like, come on, guys, it's a little excessive at this point. And I just missed a couple of episodes, and because it's something where you can't really miss episodes, and streaming wasn't a thing back then, I was just sort of like, oh well, guess I won't continue it, or maybe I'll pick it up in reruns, but I never did, and I didn't feel any loss. Not to say I think the show was getting bad, but that's all off topic. I'm bringing all this up again to let you know that I am not opposed to the idea of gender-flipping characters. That being said, I just cannot wrap my head around why they would have done this with the Penguin. Now, first of all, what strikes me as weird about the whole thing is that this is a Bruce Timm show. And of course, Bruce Timm was behind the DCAU. And when they were doing those different series that comprise that universe, and they wanted to increase the female presence, they didn't just take characters and gender flip them, they came up with new characters. You know, that's where Harley Quinn came from in the first place. That's where Livewire came from in Superman the Animated Series. And they didn't just say, oh, we're going to make a character, have her be a woman, and her personality is that she's a woman. They made these characters interesting and complex, and with backstories and motivations that worked so well, they became part of the actual comic book continuity. So I find it weird that a production where he's involved would go from having the effort to make up new characters to just gender flipping a pre-existing character. That just doesn't seem like it fits. And moreover, it feels kind of like a lazy change. Like, I showed you the design, right? Here it is again. That is what this female penguin looks like, but it just looks like the male penguin. It really does look like they took the design for the male penguin, added a little bit of a divot in his midsection to create the impression of bosoms, and then drew lipstick and an earring on him and said, there, he's a she now. And, I mean, again, you compare it to everything else they've been doing with all the redesigns and stuff that they've shown us of the show up to this point, and then we get to this, and that's the best they could have done. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if this was an 11th hour change. Like, they had developed everything in pre-production, and then on the final day, word comes down from on high, oh, by the way, we want a female villain, and the production crew's like, oh, crud, here we go. The Penguin's a woman now. Not Oswald Cobblepot, it's Oswald... Cobblepot. Oswalda Cobblepot. Totally different. And, like I said, I have no proof, but that's what it feels like. That is ultimately what I'm thinking about this. I know that there's been other attempts to debate this whole thing, but I just feel like this is kind of a lazy change that nobody really asked for. Well, nobody except maybe a producer who, I don't know what that producer's motivation would be. I mean, maybe I can assume, but I don't actually know. And yes, I've heard all of the arguments in favor of it. They all have counters. People say, well, they're allowed to make these changes because it's an Elseworlds story. Not really. Elseworlds is supposed to be where they take drastic departures from the mainstream. Just with Batman alone, you have stuff like Gotham by Gaslight, The Doom That Came to Gotham, Soul of the Dragon, I think it was, and of course the variations that appear in other Elseworlds stories like Superman Red Son, which again is a drastic departure for Superman. Those are the sort of things that count as Elseworlds. This is actually meant to be taking Batman back to his roots, which is why it has that 1940s aesthetic, or things like Catwoman having her original purple costume and things like that. To try and justify it that way just doesn't really seem to make sense. Then of course you have the argument of, well, the DCAU made changes to characters all the time. Yes, but again, like I said with the earlier Jellystone thing, the changes the DCAU made were brought to the table to enhance the characters. Mr. Freeze was a generic villain with a cold gimmick until the DCAU gave him a motivation and tragic backstory. That was an enhancement. A change, yes, but a change for the better, a change that actually made a difference. I cannot think of what sort of difference changing the Penguin from a man to a woman could make. So naturally, after you cut through all these other arguments, it will eventually come down to, look, does it really matter if the Penguin is a man or a woman? Which anyone who asks that, of course, is begging the question, because they're kind of assuming that the answer is going to be, no, it doesn't make a difference. But in that case, I can beg the question right back and say, well, if it doesn't make a difference, why was it changed in the first place? Why make a totally unnecessary change that doesn't affect something one way or the other? But ultimately, I think that's actually what cuts right to the heart of the problem. Does this change actually change anything? I think we'll have to actually see the show in order to know for certain, but I have a feeling we'll be able to tell. If this version of the Penguin, this female Oswalda Cobblepot, actually does have traits about her that justify her being a woman, maybe it'll be worth a shot. Again, there has to be some actually well-written stuff in here, but maybe she'll be worthy of a chance. If it's literally just the male Penguin, but with lipstick, like it appears to be from the teaser image, then it really wasn't a necessary change at all, and we're just going to be left wondering why. Now, I don't necessarily know what I need to look for in order to know for certain if a change was justifiable or not, but I think I'll know it when I see it. So until such time as I do see it, or not, this is the Omni viewer signing off.